And so what most of us fail to realize is that our clothing is never neutral. It's either supporting all the things that we're trying to communicate as far as I'm followable, I'm a good leader, I'm credible, I'm worth paying attention to, or it totally undermines it. But it's never neutral. And so if you look sloppy, if you look like you're totally just, I don't have any expectations of me, I don't really have any expectations of myself, I expect you guys to work really hard and be disciplined, but I certainly don't reflect that in how I show up or anything else like that. There's hypocrisy, there's all these other elements that come into it, and it's all very subconscious, but it's also all very real. And so if you're coming in and your role is to be a leader and you're going to push your team hard and you're going to have high expectations of them, you need to look like you have high expectations of yourself as well.
You often hear you dress to win, you hear all the differences about body language. Well, I wanted to dive in deep to that today with Tanner Guzy. And Tanner's made a name for himself on the social media world and the publishing world about talking about power and masculinity. But really the deeper power to that is, and the impact of that is dressing for what you want to reflect and what you want to present to yourself. So thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to do it.
So there's obviously a psychological aspect to what people are dressing and wearing. And I grew up with a mom who was a model, who modeled when she was 18 to 23 in Nashville, back when Nashville, this is a long time ago when Nashville was booming the first time. And so she was always teaching about, dress, and she was always teaching about presentation and social skills and different facets like that. So I was raised in an environment of that, but I'm still blown away when I go out, and I'm not saying I get it, but I'm still blown away when I see people and I'm like, man, you're a coach or you're a leader, male or female, and you're just not presenting yourself with that level of authority, right?
Right.
It's not that hard, is it?
It's not. It's really not. And what I see most people doing when they do that is they're very intentional about their appearance, but for some reason they choose this very anti-authoritative, anti-trustworthy, more of this kind of low level of expectations. I'm just one of the average people. I don't think too hard about this stuff or whatever else is the motivation, but they're still being very intentional about what they're wearing. It's just something that doesn't reflect what's actually going to benefit them to
You think
reflect.
it's just low self-confidence?
No, not necessarily. I mean, you could pigeonhole it and say that it's low self-confidence in their capacity to dress in a way that's better. And this is typically what most men do, is they avoid dressing poorly rather than dressing well, because as soon as you try and dress well, then you start getting into high risk, high reward potential situations where it's like, I could really kill it, or I could absolutely make a complete fool out of myself. And so I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to know if I'm actually doing this well. And so I'm just going to play it safe. And as long as I don't look like a complete idiot or a complete loser or a complete bum, then I'm fine to stay here. But then they also miss out on all these benefits too. And so I would say that, yeah, maybe from that perspective, there's a lack of confidence or a lack of effort or something else. But I think a lot of it too is just that we're part of a culture, and it's been this way since, I would argue, since the sexual revolution in the 60s, that somehow the relationship between masculinity and a concern for aesthetics, they're antithetical to each other. We've been steeped in this idea that real men don't care how they look, we shouldn't care how we look, and therefore the only way to be a real man is to look like you don't give a crap about how you look.
Yeah, and that's funny because you see when the metrosexual revolution kind of started, right? And I've always laughed. I'm a Virgo, so I'm always very interested in dressing, but I'm a big guy. I'm 6'5", about 275. So there's not a whole lot of things that fit me. You go into a store, it's tough. And I've gone to the point now of just having suits and stuff handmade, personally tailored, because you can't get them right. You can't, but it's like the shirts, I'm tall, like my inseam is a 32, but I'm 37 long, and all my shirts are long. So if I wear a regular button-down shirt, the minute I raise my hand, the bottom buttons come out. Now my stomach is sticking out, and so it was just always easier for me to wear khakis and a golf shirt. I mean, it's just, but I know that's not. I mean, that's just kind of lame,
Yes, but I think at the same point, one of the things that a lot of guys make the mistake of assuming is that in order to dress well, in order to present ourselves well, in order to be able to have that sense of authority, or this idea of this guy looks like he knows what he's doing, he's somebody that I want to trust and I want to follow, is that we have to dress more formally. And that's another reason why a lot of people resent this idea, where it's like, there's no reason for me to wear a suit and a tie, or to wear, a sport coat and a nice pair of slacks or something else like that. Like there are 1,001 good ways to dress incredibly well. And very few of them have anything to do with being more formal and having to wear a suit and a tie. I mean, I work with a lot of my one-on-one clients who are guys who work in the tech space. They work for companies like Facebook or Google or others. And if I were to have these guys show up for work meetings, let alone job interviews or anything like that, wearing a suit and a tie, they'd get laughed out of the room because that's not the company culture. That's not the culture of the industry that they're in. And they would just look like they're completely socially obtuse and they have no idea what they're doing. But that doesn't mean that there aren't ways that they can dress better than their peers without dressing more formally than their peers and still be able to communicate those things of, yeah, I care about myself. I'm disciplined. I'm ambitious. I've got good things going for me. I'm trustworthy, incredible, and worthy of this kind of respect.
So it could be jeans and a t-shirt, but still,
Absolutely.
because those jeans and t-shirt probably cost more than the khakis and the golf shirt.
Yeah, and they fit better
I
and the
mean,
construction is better and all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, you don't have to change what you're wearing as far as, we could do khakis in a golf shirt and do them that they're made from better materials and the construction is better and the colors are better on you and they fit better and you don't change anything. And most people won't be able to quantify where it's like, oh, Brett's got this really good texture to his golf shirt compared.
yeah,
They're not going to be able, but they're just going to go, why do you look so much better in this than I do in mine?
you look vibrant or you look more
Exactly.
confident.
Right? And think about it from the suiting perspective, where you
Yeah,
take somebody who is in really good suits, you look at guys who are in parts of the world like, okay, Florence, Italy, where suiting is part of their culture, and you put them against Michael Scott from The Office. And yeah,
yeah,
they're both in suits, but there's a huge difference in what those suits are, right? And again, your average guy isn't going to be able to quantify, well, like the Florentine guy, he's wearing these with deconstructed shoulders and there's a full canvas in the chest and he's got this really great pleat that's going on and it drapes really well. They're just going to say, I don't know, Michael Scott looks stupid and this guy looks really awesome. And I don't know why,
see,
but that
I
doesn't mean
think,
that you can't do it.
okay, so this is always something that I'm always fascinated with, right? So this has always been an interest of mine, but the self-esteem side is being a big guy. Now, when
Mm-hmm.
I was lean, when I was playing ball and through college, I couldn't get a pair of pants that fit right because believe it or not, my thighs were bigger than my waist, and so it was hard, right?
That would be a
And
challenge.
yeah, and people listening to this, yes, it was true. I mean, I could show you pictures. Okay, I'm looking up around. Then I just said I don't care anymore, and I gained a lot of
Right.
weight, and I care, but it's just like bigger, oversized stuff, and I don't like to feel things that are tight on me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I can't wear, I've worn a double X shirt since I was 17 or 18, right? Um, and like double X today is not double X that it was back then. Double
Right.
X now is like large. Like
Right.
I don't want to feel a skin tight shirt, but it's weird, right? Like, so where did like I did some TV for the Golf Channel,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy who brought me on said the first thing I want you to do is go get color matched before you come on.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. My mom used to talk about it. I never did it,
Yeah.
and went in and they were like, okay, the tailors were like, this is what you need to wear. And but it was always, do you wear a jacket? Like me being a psychologist, should I wear a jacket? But then I watch the people I love to study, they're wearing button-down shirts or t-shirts. Why
Mm-hmm.
do I feel like I need to go so formal?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where do you go for this stuff? Like, this is really interesting to me.
Right. And this is the whole reason why I do what I do. This is why I wrote the book that I did, because most people just get kind of stuck in these very surface level concerns of, does this look good, or how does this work, or what are the patterns and how does that match? And then you really do have to dive deeper into this idea. What you just talked about is this whole component of what I teach about tribe and being a psychologist and where you fit in within that hierarchy. I've got a client that I work with who is in your same space, and he works primarily with men, and he works primarily with men who are unapologetic about being masculine, and he has to dress in a way that very much eschews that whole stereotypical soft, nerdy tweed blazer and sport, with the elbow
Yeah.
patches and everything. Like, he has to dress in a way that evokes a little bit more of this kind of rugged and dangerous masculinity because of who his patients are and how he's working with these men. And so you need to think about these kind of things. And sadly and understandably, because we're not taught to think about it this way, most guys just kind of throw their hands up and say, I have no idea how to do this, so I'm just going to keep wearing
Yeah.
my khaki and my golf shirts. Yeah.
Yeah. If I go to the tailor and they give me I buy a suit and sport coats, I'm like, which shirts go with it?
Yeah.
And then
Because we
that's my
just want that
rotation.
really like that really just
Yeah.
like color and pattern, and give me something that I know that I can quantify and I can execute on, but don't make me wade into the deep end as far as the psychology and the communication and how it makes you think about me and how it makes me think when I see myself on TV or in the mirror or anything else like that. That's where
So
the
do
real
you,
power comes in.
so do you think, and I give one of my players a lot of credit. One of my tour players I work with is a guy by the name of Billy Horschel, and he's sponsored by, and he's one of the faces of Ralph Lauren Sport.
Hmm.
always. I mean, it is perfect.
Yep.
And I mean, I give Billy a lot of credit for it because it's important to him, but his is feel good, look good, play good.
Yeah.
And it's an image, everything he does. And I give him a lot of credit for that. But if you were to get a job, okay, a lot of coaches listen to this. They get a job, their first job in college. Would this be a primary goal of yours to say, start dressing like you're going to be the head coach?
Absolutely. Especially because it helps set the precedent. You're a coach, like you're a leader. That's what you've been hired to do, is lead a group of men. And you need as
Or
many
women.
things
Yeah,
to,
or women.
right,
Yeah.
or men or women, right. But you need as many things to your advantage as you can possibly get. You need, and so what most of us fail to realize is that our clothing is never neutral. It's either supporting all the things that we're trying to communicate as
Hmm.
far as I'm followable, I'm a good leader, I'm credible, I'm worth paying attention to, or it totally undermines it, but it's never neutral. And so
I
if you
love
look
that. That's
sloppy,
right.
if you look like you're totally just, yeah, don't have any expectations of me, I don't really have any expectations of myself, I expect you guys to work really hard and be disciplined, but I certainly don't reflect that in how I show up or anything else like that. There's hypocrisy, there's all these other elements that come into it, and it's all very subconscious, but it's also all very real. And so if you're coming in and your role is to be a leader and you're going to push your team hard and you're going to have high expectations of them, you need to look like you have high expectations of yourself as well.
What about men that coach women?
I would say it's the same thing. Where,
Okay.
yeah, you may want to soften it a little bit because you have to think about it from a different perspective as far as it's not like the dynamic is not the same,
Yeah, it's not the
but
same.
right, but you still need to be able to convey things that, yeah, maybe there's a little bit more safety and a little bit more trustworthiness to balance out some of that authority and everything else, so that there's not this hard divisive line of I can't actually depend on my coach or talk to my coach or anything else like that. But but trustworthiness and safety and dependability don't go hand in hand with sloppiness or apathy or anything else that's communicated by dressing poorly.
Yeah. It's interesting. I've often thought about that from a perspective of, should we train our college student athletes? I've always said they should get table manner training. My
Hmm.
mom used to teach that to me as a kid, and I go out to dinner with my student athletes or my coaches, and they're hunched over and they're shoveling. I'm like, oh my God, that's just a massive. I mean, teach table manners, right? It's
Yeah.
not who eats the fastest gets the most. But it's the same as dress. Like, and in today's world, our boundaries have changed so dramatically, and I think for the positive. And so there's a lot more expression in the way that people dress, and I'm seeing a
Yep.
lot more male athletes talking about expressing themselves with their dress and their presentation and taking a image. So important. Should we be training them from a coach standpoint and say, hey, look, let's get ahead of this. Let's help you embrace your individuality through your presentation.
Yeah, that's a great question, especially because are you looking at it from the perspective of this is going to help you be able to catch the eyes of scouts and be able to play professionally and move up in your career and everything in that regard?
Maybe down the road after that.
Yeah,
It's
because
it's interesting. Let's use an example. Let's use Cam
okay,
Newton as an example.
yeah.
Okay, very out there in the way
Hmm.
he dresses. What do you think his motivation is?
Oh man, okay. I don't know if I could put my finger on it, but I think a lot of it for guys that are in that position, because you see it across different disciplines of sport, where you see it with guys like Conor McGregor, or Michael Jordan was this way when he was, at the top of his game and he was wearing his baggy shorts when everybody else is wearing stuff at mid thigh. It's a high status signal. It's basically, I'm so good at this game that I can handle all the pressure that comes from everybody else paying attention to me. In fact, I
Hmm.
embrace it. Pay more attention to
Like
me. I
more eyes on me.
deserve that scrutiny. I can handle it, as opposed to I got to kind of fly under the radar. I don't know if I belong here. I've got a little bit of imposter syndrome. Maybe I can continue to sneak by or be clean or play by the rules or anything else like that. There's a certain level of, you're good enough that you want to stand out. And what it does is, if people start to follow in your footsteps, then they automatically have now submitted themselves to your frame and to your
Hmm.
aesthetics and everything. And so it just stratifies and makes you even more of a high status figure within your given sport or activity or anything else, because then people are copying you. You're a leader. They're trying to emulate you because you
Do
are
you think
so
it?
good.
Do you think it backfired on Cam Newton though? Because
Maybe.
everything I've heard from inside the locker room and knowing people that have played with him, it's like it doesn't match what he's dressing as.
Yeah, totally. And that's the same thing. Like, look at Dennis Rodman, right?
Yeah.
like totally out there, but his skill set wasn't high enough to justify being that out there and that brazen. And so it is. It's something you have to risk. I dealt with that. I remember going to my first amateur boxing bout when I was training, and I remember watching the heavyweight guys warm up, and there was one dude who was in all the right gear, all of this awesome, really like high quality, thousands of dollars worth of stuff. And he's intimidating, big dude, and he's in his head and he's got his Beats headphones on, and you're watching him warm up and you're just like, this is gonna be an awesome fight, right? Like this guy knows what he's doing. And he gets in the ring and he's pathetic. And it makes
Hmm.
it even more of a disappointment because what he signaled is some level of mastery. I am high status, I am in the sport, this is my identity, I'm capable. And then the skill set doesn't actually back it up. And so that contrast principle makes him look even worse than he
Hmm.
would if he were to have just dressed like a normal guy going in for a normal fight.
So, okay, that's interesting. So let's compare and contrast males and females for a minute. Let's use
Okay.
coaches, athletic department. Males have historically allowed to have been sloppy under, they're just ball coaches, sweatshirt, sweat
Right.
thing. Female coaches don't get that same latitude. They have
Right.
to present themselves in the heels and the dresses and the all that. There's a little bit of a double standard. Is it shifting now? Are men starting to be held to that standard at the same way?
I hope so. To be fully honest, I'm not super involved in watching or participating in a lot of team sports, and so I don't
Mhm.
see as much of the evolution. I see. It's funny that we're talking about this now because I remember a meme that just came up yesterday that was showing the difference between American football coaches, and it's big guys and in really big
Mm.
sloppy clothing, and then you have European football, soccer coaches, and they're trim and they're dressed incredibly
Yes.
well, and all these expectations that come with that. And you certainly see the way like that the NBA has shifted with what LeBron James has done, and then you start to see that trickle into coaching and other things like that. And so I hope that it gets there, but I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily seeing any huge evidence of that, especially not in things like the NFL or other of these kind of more traditionally just pure testosterone American sports. But who knows where we'll go.
So when you look at the individual sports, like you're talking about boxing and MMA fighting, there's oftentimes that peacocking that happens.
Hmm.
Okay. But you just described the probably every fear of every athlete listening to this. Oh my God, I hope I can back it up.
Exactly,
So
right?
where do you start? Do you start more conservative or do you start more aligned with your, I call it a psychological fingerprint. Do you start more aligned with your psychological fingerprint?
I would say, and this is something that I teach all my guys, irrespective of whether they're athletes or anything else, is you compare it to the principle of progressive overload, like with strength training,
Hmm.
where, if I'm trying to get to where I can deadlift 500 pounds, I did 345 for 3 reps this morning. Last week, I did 340 for 3 reps. I'm an idiot if I go in next week and I put 500 on the bar. I
Yeah.
can't do it. Like I'm incapable of doing that. But I'm also an idiot and I'm cutting myself short if I go in next week and I only put 135 on the bar and I count that as good enough. And so it does. It takes some social intelligence, some emotional intelligence, and those kind of things to be able to gauge where you are, where your skill set is, where you fit within the hierarchy of your team, and that kind of stuff. But start applying that progressive overload to this is where I am, this is where I want to be, and I'm going to start dressing a little bit more indicative of where I want to be, if not all the way indicative of where I want to be. I'm just going to start eking my way over there a little bit more. Because if
So tell
not,
me,
then you deal with this dissonance of I dress
yes.
like I'm at the top of my game and I'm not, and then it does totally affect your performance
Oh,
because you feel like a
totally.
fake and a fraud. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me where to start. Like for somebody like me, I mean, I'm 40, I'll be 48 next month.
Hmm.
I've got no more hair on the top of my head. I've grown the beard for the first time in the last 18 months. I
Which
love
this is
it.
a good look. Yeah, the beard and the shaved head, that's embrace that. That looks good.
Okay, good. Well, now I'm on a 50-pound weight loss because my wife says you got to be skinny with the bald head. So
Hmm.
I'll lose 50. And don't worry, people listening to this, there's a good reward there for me. So I always go by money. So she's put it on the line for me.
Nice.
Um, so I mean, where do you start? I mean, like my oldest daughter is very into fashion. She has a jewelry line. She
Hmm.
she does some stuff, and she's like, we'll watch golf on TV. She's like, khaki's way out. Okay, it's silver, it's blue, it's purples, it's in the professional golf world. Some
Right.
people will wear khaki, but
Right.
you look at an entire group, they're all wearing silver pants. It's like,
Right.
okay, it's shifted. So where do you start? Do you start with the pant? Do you start with the shirt? Do you start with the shoe? Like, where the hell do you start?
That's a great question. The answer that I'll give is one that is frustrating to hear, but it's also really important because a lot of guys who do what I do, they're guys who, you can go watch YouTube videos or you can go read blogs or anything. There's a whole like men's style space that's out there. And the main thing that they'll talk about is fit is king. Like wear the same thing that you're wearing now, but dial in the fit. So for example, like you and I are seeing each other as I look at your polo shirt that you have on. If the sleeves were a little bit shorter and a little bit tighter, that would be a more flattering fit on you. Or if you were to undo one more button on that shirt so that you're exposing a little bit more chest, then that shows a little bit
like
more
that.
confidence, a little bit more relaxed, right?
Okay.
All of a sudden that changes things, right?
All right. I
So
like it.
you could tweak those little
What
things.
about longer sleeves? I usually
No.
like longer.
Oh, like
No.
long, like if they actually are longer, like,
Yeah,
okay. So if you're talking about a short sleeve that comes all the way down into the crook of your elbow, that's a bad look because it makes your arms
that's
look
better.
scrawny. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're wearing a short sleeve, you want it to be about mid bicep and you want it to be so that
Right
you're
there.
showing,
You can
yep,
see what I
about,
wear when I play golf. You can see the tan line difference.
yes, where that line is, right?
Yeah.
So you want it to be about right there. And that's the same thing that I've got going on right now is you've got this and then you've
Yeah.
got just a little bit of some room in here because if it's too baggy, then again, what it does is it makes your arms look like they're too scrawny for the rest of your body. And
Huh.
for big guys, that's even more of a problem because then the contrast between these visually small arms, irrespective of how big they actually are, but
Yeah.
these visually small arms compared to the fact that it's tighter and it hangs around your body, it totally throws off your proportions, and so it makes you look bad. So yeah, guys will say like things fit or fit is king and stuff like that, but ultimately what it always comes down to is context is king. Because I could put you in a really great looking three-piece suit that fits perfectly and it's awesome, but if you wear that on the golf course, you're a moron,
Moron. Yeah,
right?
completely.
And so you need to know the context of what it is you're doing, who it is that you are, who the audience is, what kind of signals they're expecting, what kind of signals you're trying to expect yourself. There's a whole process that is involved with this, which is why when I coach guys, or you can read about this in my book, it's a much deeper dive than just go buy these colors and wear this
Yeah.
fit of pants and everything else like that, because that only gets you to a very surface level understanding. And the problem with that is it's also very limited as far as you may luck out and wear stuff that looks really good now, but you're not going to be able to replicate that again and again and again as styles change
Hmm.
and evolve. And styles are designed to change and evolve. You're never going to be able to wear the same thing in 10 years that you're wearing today without looking like, oh, I peaked in 2020 or I peaked in 2006 and that was it. That was the best
Right.
my life ever was, and nothing's ever improved since then.
Love that. What are the accessories that are important? I mean,
Anything that
obviously
has
men in
symbolism.
watch. Okay.
Yep.
What does an Apple Watch say versus? So I will tell you. I mean, I'm not a Rolex guy. I mean, I
Hmm.
think they're great. I
Yeah.
love Breitling. I've always
Yes.
liked Breitling.
Like the
My
Navitimer and
Breitling,
stuff.
yeah, the Breitling battery died. So right when COVID hit, so I've been wearing my Apple Watch. But
Hmm.
when I'm on stage, I don't like to wear my Apple Watch because I like to have a fancier watch or when I'm
Right.
doing more corporate clients. Am I wrong for that? Or am I?
No, no, not at all. Because guys who get watches, a watch is a really great example of this kind of like tribal signaling where, yeah, everybody sees a Rolex or they see kind of a fancy watch and they understand that it's a fancy watch, but you have to be a watch guy to be able to understand the difference between like a vintage date just and something like a Patek Philippe or something else. And so when you're in a crowd and you're amongst people that see and understand that, then it can be a very covert way of being able to signal like, I speak your guys' language, I'm one of you guys,
Yeah.
I've attained the same level of success, I understand the way that this world works and I'm part of it, without it being totally overt and blatant and flashing into the face. And that's where you get into luxury brands like Gucci and Louis Vuitton and stuff like that, where it's just like, you're throwing up a middle finger to everybody. It's like, look how much money I have. And in a lot of circles of success, that kind of conspicuous consumption or overt luxury signals, those are actually really gouged and really frowned upon.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a really clean watch and it's a nice timepiece and it's not just, the same Submariner that everybody has, but
Yep.
it's something that's a little bit different and reflects a little bit of personality. If your audience gets that, then that boosts your credibility and your authority and everything else so much more with them than if you're just wearing something that's simple.
How do you go about the consulting process? Because you've got me so intrigued.
Awesome.
I do a lot of stage work, I'm not an actor, but I speak a lot.
Yeah.
And it's always, so I worked in the pharmaceutical industry for 8 years, right? It was always
Hmm.
dressed one step higher than your customer. I
Yep.
wasn't in sales, I was in medical, I was in medical education. So a
Right.
lot of times I was going in and meeting with the professor who, has had the same jacket for 27 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And, the sales team would come in and they would be looking just spot, but it would be so intimidating to the
Yes.
professor. He would be
Yes.
like, oh my God. And so we would try to match it. There would be days that I would be tie on, tie off. I would be in the car when I was in Atlanta, matching between. Um, where do you start with that process?
I
Like,
love that you already get that, because that's so important. Okay, so when I coach my guys, we go through 3 phases. The first thing that I do with them is we do a closet evaluation. So if you and I were working together, we'd look at everything that you have in your closet, and I tell you, this stuff's great, it's awesome, keep it. This stuff's pretty good, but you need to get it tailored. So let that in, bring that out, do whatever we need
yeah,
to. And then the third category is the stuff where it's like, Brett, dude, don't ever wear that ever again. That's
ever
just
again.
bad news, right? Like,
Yeah.
just get rid of it. On the surface level, it's nice because we get rid of all of the bad stuff. But the real reason I start there is because, like I said earlier, there's 1,001 different ways to be stylish. And being stylish isn't actually the goal. It's being able to effectively communicate and use this as a communication tool between yourself and your audience. And so by going through your closet with you, I get an idea of what your natural inclinations towards your
Mm.
style already are. Because then the next phase, what we do is we go through this 6-step process in which I teach you how to be able to take where you already are, and we get rid of the stuff that's not great, and we build upon the stuff that is great, and then we expand on it even further. And so in that phase, we'll talk about like the simple stuff, like what colors do and don't work, what kind of patterns you should be wearing. But then it's a much deeper dive on things like who your audience is and what are the kind of signals that they're going to be intimidated by or comforted by, or how do you signal status or competence or all these other things with them. We're going to talk a lot about how it reflects on you, because most guys think about dressing well when it comes to the perspective of how it affects other people and other people's perception of me. Whereas the real power of it is how it affects you, how it affects your
Yeah.
sense of confidence, your ability to go in and totally own a room, or to be able to pull the gray man and slide under the radar when that's the appropriate and effective thing to do. And, I teach my guys to be able to be, what should I call it, aesthetic chameleons, where you can adapt to whatever the situation
Mm.
is so that you use your clothes to help you accomplish your goals. So we build out this whole phase so that I get you to the point where you understand all of these kind of deeper, more philosophical things, and then you don't need me after we're done with that to be able to get you there. And then the third phase is that we do a bunch of shopping, because we take all this in theory and then we actually apply it in principle. So that I'll teach you how to talk to sales associates, how to eliminate decision fatigue, how to find the right brands that are actually going to work for you, and all this kind of stuff. And by the time we go through all this, you come out on the other end not having worked with a stylist where they just give you a fish, but becoming totally self-competent and very aware of, okay, this is how I'm going to do this, and I can use these same tools for the rest of my life. And then you become very proficient at it, and you don't need me anymore. Like I've never had a repeat client. If I have a guy repeat, it means I failed. I didn't do my job
Mm.
right.
What do you, I love that. I love that. So, but what do you do? I'm gonna go back to the big guys.
Yeah.
Okay. 6'5", 275, 280 for me. At my best, I was, after playing balls, 240. Okay.
Okay.
There ain't nothing on the rack really fits right.
Right.
I mean,
So how do we
I
do
don't
that?
understand. I don't understand why the triple X hasn't made it. Listen, I'm not saying from overweight, but we do have a pretty overweight section of this
Right.
country.
Yeah.
And I look at really good man. Like I like to wear, I'll a lot of times wear Peter Millar shirts,
Hmm.
like golf shirts. That's typically what I wear when I play golf because they stand up, they don't fade, they don't whatever, but they fit. But if I wear their button down shirts, no chance.
Right.
Or,
Yep.
I hate to say it, like I'm a joke when I say this, Lululemon, no chance in hell will I ever be able to wear a pullover.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Not that I need to wear Lululemon, but you get my
Right.
point. Like
Now,
I'll
one of
get
my
one as a
one of my
gift and
strength
it's like,
coaches loves Lulu stuff. It's fantastic
yeah,
for him, but it's totally, again, context is king, because it depends on if
yeah,
it fits, if it doesn't, right? Typically what I do with men in your situation, in fact, I just started working with a guy who's he's pretty similar to you. I think he's 6'3" instead of 6'5". And a lot of it is being aware of brands that either are specifically catered to your size demographic, or being aware
because
of
I
the
don't want to
fact
go to
that,
the big and tall store. Have you ever really
yo,
been in the big and tall store?
yeah, it sucks, because you're
Awful.
it's basically all one size fits all, and everything's a moo.
Yes.
It
Everything gets
sucks.
huge around the
Exactly.
lower trunk. And
Yep.
then as the day goes on, your shirt is hanging out.
Hmm.
It's just awful. I mean, it
It
literally, for
sucks.
people who are like, my mom used to always tell people, don't ever marry. My mom being a model, and she was really into fashion. When she married my dad, he was in the Air Force. He was a 20-year Air Force guy who wore the same color every single day. And so she would buy him these Italian suits, and all, he couldn't fit in them because he was big like me. He was big and tall.
Right.
And uh, and so she used to always tell my wife, like, don't marry a tall guy. You can't get the good card, and they never wear cute clothes. And it's true. It's like, khaki pants, shirt, because it works. I mean, you don't have a lot of options. You
Right.
go into the suit store and they have all these killer. I mean, I like this stuff. All these killer patterns, and you get to the 52 extra long, and it's like black, blue, and a pinstripe.
Yep.
And I'm
Yep.
like,
So this
thank
is where
you.
you
I'm
go
going to a
custom.
funeral.
This is
Yeah.
where you go custom. And it's really the barrier of entry on that is so much smaller than it used to be. That's one of the many
Yeah, it is
benefits
definitely.
of globalism and how how the internet has changed everything, because you can get, it used to be incredibly difficult to be able to find even just good custom companies in your hometown, let alone being able to, like, well, I'm going to fly to Savile Row and I'm going to go through a 6 month bespoke
Right.
process and spend 50 grand on this suit. Like, it's awesome to be able to do stuff like that. But now you can get European stuff that is totally custom fit to you, and it's going to fit your size, and you're going to pay 700, 8, 1500,
Yeah.
something in that territory to kind of get out the door, and you can get great patterns. You can get shirts for 100 to 150 bucks, and you have a ton of different cloth options to choose from, and it's all going to be built around you and what your actual sizing is, as opposed to just like, well, you're too big for all this regular stuff, and so we're just going to make it fit like a tent on you, and you just have to put up with that because boohoo for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
100% nailed it. I mean, that's the thing that just is so frustrating. I know a lot of the athletes I work with, I mean, that's their issue. They're huge
absolutely.
chest, huge arms. They don't have a chance.
Yeah.
And,
No, I used to work for a
college,
custom suit company, and we would have athletes come in all the time. Even if it's basketball players who, I'm
oh,
6 feet tall, and their torsos would be the same length as mine, but their legs would be, a foot longer, and their arms would be another 6 inches longer.
yeah,
It's like off the rack stuff just is not going to fit you guys. Yeah, the
yeah,
custom is a really, it's so much easier than it used to be.
yeah. How do you find a good one in town? Because obviously you can fly out to Salt Lake City where you're at, right? You're in
Right.
Utah.
Yep.
But where am I going to go? I mean, I can't go to LA. I'm not sure as hell not going to New York now. So where do I go?
Right. Start looking at some online brands.
What about
When
the
it
ones that
comes
call you all the
to,
time that want to come to your office?
right, see, I'm hesitant on those guys
Me too.
because there is a, okay, so the first thing that I would say, I'm going to get us both in trouble with this, but so be it. The first thing I'll say is find companies that do their cut and sew in Europe as opposed to in Asia,
Okay.
because the laws and the way that it works, the artistry and the way that that works and everything else, is just a very different experience. And so you want to find brands that are doing stuff that way. Yes, there's some fantastic companies that are doing stuff out of Thailand or out of China, but they're fewer and farther in between. And most of the cheap stuff that you run into, like the really low grade polyester and the stuff that just feels awful, and just,
Yeah.
most of that is based out of there. And so finding brands that work out of Europe or even out of South America, or obviously the United States, then there are going to be some benefits there. But even taking advantage of different online brands like Proper Cloth, fantastic for shirts. I highly encourage you, your listeners, go
Okay.
check those guys out because
We'll
they're
do.
awesome. And there's hundreds of cloth options to pay attention to, and they're incredible.
Is that
I
the one that
can
was on
name,
Shark Tank? No.
no, no, well, maybe. I don't know. That's a good question.
Okay.
I can even tell you the company that I used to work for, Beckett and Robb, they have a great online fitting program where what they would do is they would send you out a fit sample that's based on kind of what your general sizing is. And I know that, I had done fittings for guys that were up to almost 400 pounds. Like, there's a whole
Yeah.
range of different sizes, and then you do a virtual fitting where you're on a video call with them, and you have this sample garment on, and they're talking about, okay, well, let's bring the sleeves up a quarter centimeter here, and let's tighten that or let that out or whatever else, and then get you a really, really good looking suit.
What happens
And
if you
the
like, but
process is really simple.
how about for me if I don't like a suit jacket to feel tight through here.
Yeah, great.
Whatever. And I'm always like, don't do that. And they're like, but I love it. I'm like, is the button supposed to button?
That's, yes, the button is supposed to button.
Yes.
Yep. And here's the other thing that's really tricky, and that's another reason why those two
Yes.
companies are worth paying attention to. I tell my guys about this with tailors all the time, because it seems like you have this kind of difficulty of, you either find a tailor who's really crappy at what they do, but they'll do whatever you want and they'll make their best effort at it, or you find one who's really, really skilled but they're also incredibly opinionated, and it doesn't matter
Yes.
what you say, they're going to tailor your clothing exactly how they want it to
Yeah.
be. You need to find somebody who's very good and also willing to say, look, I'm not the man wearing this thing. I know you are. I'm going to make it fit for you in a way that actually works for
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's when you said that, because I was like, I went to a tailor one time, I had some jackets made, and I said, I don't like the feeling of this being tight right through here because I have a
Hmm.
belly.
Hmm.
So if it feels tight that day, then I feel like I'm having a bad day,
Yeah.
right? But if
Yep.
it feels loose, I feel like a friggin' rock star. Like I've
Yes.
made the right choices.
Yep.
Damn thing came in, and he's like, no, 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 it's barely supposed to button. And I'm like, that makes me feel like I'm wearing a jacket that's 2 sizes too small.
Right.
Like
Yep.
I
And there are
know you
ways to
can
be
do
able to
that.
make it button and have a good clean drape with the front quarters that
Yes.
open and everything else without it looking like it's pulling apart at the button and it's barely making it work. And what it's probably him doing is scrambling where it's like, oh, I forgot to actually add more to the measurement. So I'm going to try and sell them on this so that I don't have to remake it or anything else like that. And
Gotcha.
there, you don't have to make compromises like that.
Gotcha. Do you think if you had, let me ask you this. I mean, if you're a coach that just signs a $2 million deal a year to
Okay.
coach,
Yeah.
do you just get all handmade stuff? I mean, even like casual clothes, like the shirt you're wearing there. I mean,
Hmm.
you wouldn't get a golf shirt that's handmade. I mean, you would personally tailored. I mean, if I'm
Not
in my country club, I can buy a shirt that fits okay.
Right. Yeah, I would still probably get it tailored where you're buying something off the rack and then getting it altered, but
Okay.
you don't need to have everything that's made from scratch. Now, that said, if that kind of stuff is what is, again, the context, if that kind of stuff is what's indicative of credibility and because okay, if you're down in the deep south or you're back in the
Yeah.
northeast versus being signed on to something, in Utah or in California, like those aesthetics and those expectations are very, very different,
Yeah.
and WASP culture versus Southern culture versus NorCal culture. And so you have to pay attention to those kind of things too. And if you are in one of those states or one of those areas where the uniform of success and credibility is more formal and it is more custom and it is more that, then yeah, you should pay for it. And if it's not, then don't worry about it. Have one or two things that look really, really good for when you need them. But for the most part, you can get away with doing your regular kind of off the rack stuff and then just getting it altered so it's dialed in a little bit further than where it would be.
Nice. I love that. What do you, you know, what do you see as the big trend that's coming in besides masks in 2021, 2022? I mean, what's the trend? I mean, what do you see? Because what I love, on your website and stuff, like I like the mountain, not the vest, but you know what I'm saying,
Hmm.
the I don't even know, the Patagonia vest type of look. I mean,
Yes. Uh-huh.
that looks great, but
That kind of rugged outdoorsy stuff. Yeah.
yeah, but South Alabama, I mean, come on, we're going to wear it 3 times
Right.
in a year. Okay.
Right.
So what do you see as the trends that are coming? Is it the big, I mean, what was it, a P code a couple of years ago? I mean, look, I'm out of my element here, but
No, that's good. That's a good question. I think one of the things that's interesting that's happened within the last 10, 15 years, especially with internet culture, especially with globalization, with everything else, is it used to be that you would have these big macro trends. And you still see that to some extent with women's fashion and things like that. But with men's style, there really isn't much of that anymore. Like, yeah, you get these big swings to like, in 2013 to 2018, everything went hyper skinny. And that came
oh
out from
yeah,
like the skate and the punk rock culture and everything else
hated
like
that
that,
crap.
right? Yeah, which is understandable, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
work with your body, it doesn't work with the subcultures that you're a part of.
right.
Like you would totally hate that. And so you'll see kind of big swings in those directions and stuff like that. But as far as like pieces that everybody's going to be paying attention to, I think as a society, we're done with seeing stuff like that because we're so
Okay.
bifurcated as far as everybody's more involved in their subcultures than just this big unifying movement of, yeah, we're all doing peacoats or we're all, because I mean, honestly, like one of the trends that I just got turned on to is you see it's guys who are like military prepper boogaloo type guys, and they wear all this tactical stuff, but then they wear these aloha shirts because it's a
Hmm.
way to like have some fun with it and throw in a little bit of a go to hell vibe with it or stuff like that. Or I'm seeing, in the menswear circle, you see guys really embracing like fuller cuts with longer drapes and big pleats and heavy cuffs and things
Pleats are
like that.
back
Pleats are
in
back.
pants.
High waisted pleats are back, and it's awesome.
No,
The guys who do it really, really well. Yeah, but that doesn't mean you're going to see everybody doing it because
the
it's very
big thick
specific to
leg and
that subculture, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And
Huh.
so again,
That's why I
context is
always like to
king.
watch the. That's why I always like to watch the NFL draft because
Yes.
the suits are coming out and the guys are wearing no socks and their pants are barely covering their ankle. And I'm
Right.
like, okay, they can pull that off. They're 22 and millionaires, but
Exactly.
it looks good on them. I mean, it looks good.
Right. And they pull it off really well, and they have the swagger and the status and everything else to be able to pull it off. And it's the same way. And what's funny about that is you look at like the 94 NBA draft and the stuff that those guys were wearing, where the jackets are all the way down to their knees and it's like
They're
6
like
buttons and
draped.
it's so
Yeah.
awful. And in 20 years, we're going to feel that same way about seeing the hyper skinny, no show socks and all that other kind of stuff too. And that's just part of the game, is you just kind of have to embrace it. However hard you're riding a trend, you're going to cringe that much harder when it's out of trend at that
Yeah.
point. But that doesn't mean that
Where
there
do you,
aren't benefits.
what are the basic websites to go on just to stay? I mean, it's not GQ anymore, right? I mean,
No, no. Um, if you're looking for more of the just like the classic kind of menswear stuff, then styleforum.net is a really good one.
okay.
That's for more of like the suiting and your business casual and that kind of stuff. If you want really strong opinions, then surprise, surprise, Reddit. You know, you can go to Our Male Fashion
Yeah.
Advice is another really good one. But those guys are funny because they will, like 8 years ago, it was just gray chinos and a navy sport coat and your Allen Edmonds strands, and that was the uniform. And anybody who did anything different than that was just gouch and you're an idiot. And then it moves into streetwear and all this other stuff kind of happens. And so you can pay attention to that. But really, more than anything else, it's finding guys who are representative of what is an aesthetic that is aspirational for you, and finding them on sites like Instagram and following them there. And so it's finding individual people as opposed to just main sites that are kind of dictating out this is what's hot or this is what's coming up, because yeah, again, we're kind of moving away from that as a macro culture.
Yeah. As we're recording this right before I got on, I saw Brooks Brothers file for bankruptcy.
Filed, yeah, yep. Which is, think about the legacy and everything there, and
Yeah.
it's a shame, right? And I mean, it makes sense because a lot of times people talk about the safety of the suit. The suit's never going away, it's not going anywhere. And style changes, it evolves. We're not wearing tri-corner hats anymore. We're not wearing lace around our necks or around our wrists
Yeah.
like the aristocracy did. We're not wearing, the ears of our foes that we've conquered like different cultures have. And like
Right. Yeah.
men have always cared about their appearance, and that won't change, but the way that that's expressed will continue to evolve. And especially as things get more culturally hot, with riots and the stratification of different subcultures and everything else. Now, I could safely say that that's one thing that we can expect to see is I expect to see more and more polarizing appearances that are very
Yeah.
much like, this is how my tribe dresses, and we are nothing like your tribe, and we're nothing like them or anything else. Because as we get more and more like that culturally, then people will want to signal that more and more aesthetically as well.
You're pulling up obviously the Sebastian Younger book.
Yeah,
What is it? Tribalism
tribes.
or tribe?
Yeah,
Tribe.
yeah.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, it's fascinating to see how we work with groups, and you go to another part of town and or another part of town, another part of the country, and you look at a part of town and you're like, wow, that's just a completely different style. Like,
Hmm.
it's fascinating. It's
Yep. Even
definitely
like
fascinating.
I've got a neighbor who he's a good buddy of mine, and he moved here from North Carolina, and he still wears Brooks Brothers button downs and boat shoes. And
Mm,
he stands out like a sore thumb because in Utah you wear a t-shirt and you wear slip-on Vans if you're at that
mm.
level of casual, and that's just kind of what everybody else. And it's like, why are you so dressed up? And that's because that's the culture where he comes from, and that's just carried on through for him. And yeah, all that kind of stuff. And I think we'll just see. I mean, look at the aesthetic differences between like social justice warriors and the
Yep.
Black Lives Matter movement, and even like the Black Panthers, and you have all of this very like postmodernism and rejection of the West. And then I think as you see more and more of a culture that's built around trying to hold on to that and promote that, you'll see a very specific aesthetic that comes in with that. And maybe that's where some of this tactical aloha shirt stuff is going to be. I have no idea, but whatever the more the more disparate a culture is. I mean, look at punk rock versus Orthodox Jews,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Both of them are basically saying, I'm not part of the mainstream, and they don't want you to confuse them as being part of the mainstream. And so they have their uniform that is very much a rejection of what your standard kind of mainstream aesthetic is.
It's so amazing how we connect through dress. I mean, it
Hmm.
really is. And I always tell like my college athletes is like, they'll say, well, yeah, I don't care what I wear. I'm like, then why do you wear your football gear every day on campus?
Yep.
Well, I don't have a whole lot of money. No, you do, because when I see you go out, you're wearing something a lot nicer. It's the fact that you want to be a part of the in crowd,
Exactly.
and you want to be connected. So when people see you wearing your jersey or your workout gear and it's got your number on it, people go, "Oh, he's part of the team or she's part of the team." I
Yep.
fell for it too. I mean,
Yeah.
look, you do that stuff. Sweet, I love it. Tell
And
people where they
embrace it.
can. Yeah, 100% embrace it. I mean, I guess that's the thing is, I was working with an athlete this past year at one of my universities, and he was a football player, and I said, "What do you like to do?" He goes, "I like to make a statement with what I dress. When we have our annual awards, when we have all this, I want to get it out on Instagram." And he goes, "People think I will be one way or the other. To me, I'm fascinated by how we project our confidence and our self-esteem through the way that we dress."
Hmm.
And he said, he said, our generation is a little bit different than your generation in that our generation, it really embraces that. And he said, probably it's Instagram, but it's how we look, it's how we present ourselves. Everything is our finest hour.
Right.
And I was like, that's a very brilliant way of saying it.
Yeah. Because
But because,
you're a personal brand and it's your marketing. Just like
yeah,
companies put all this energy and attention into their logos. And I mean, you think about how much energy Apple puts into the way their stores are designed, and the cords have 13
yeah.
coils to them and everything else like that. Like millennials and Y generation, everything, like they get that you're always on display, you're always being evaluated. And so you have to have that stuff dialed in.
Do you think the Gary Vaynerchuk t-shirt, jeans, and tennis shoes is a scripted look, or do you think
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing
that was
with,
the rejection of the establishment?
right. And that's Mark Zuckerberg, the way that he is. That's the whole tech industry or the whole hustle culture, anything else like that. It is a blatant rejection of the old trappings of what success were, because they're trying to shake things up.
Are those stylists that came in and said this is what you need to do, or is it just something that they matched who they are and they were savvy enough to catch it?
I think it's more that. It's more that than having a stylist. And I mean, you look at somebody like Zuckerberg, he's paying $400 for his jeans, and
Yeah,
multiple hundreds of dollars for his t-shirts. Like, he's still spending money on his clothes, but he understands that that's the uniform. And part of the power of Silicon Valley is that it's a rejection of the rest of the world, and there's that uniform that fits there. And Vaynerchuk is the same way, where it's no, I'm what he's signaling is I'm focusing too much on my work ethic to pay any attention to my clothing, even
oh
though
yeah,
we all know that you pay attention to your clothing as part of the signal that you're working too hard to pay attention to your clothing,
yeah.
right? And so it's almost like an emperor's new clothes type of thing, where it's very like you got to wink at it a little bit.
Like, like we still drive Mercedes and BMWs, and now they're going to release the Ford Bronco, which will be the ultimate.
I hope they don't ruin it, man. Please don't
I know.
ruin it like they did with the Blazer. Come
Yeah, the
on.
Blazer's awful.
Give me some of that classic. Like, the old Broncos are so good. And
Yeah,
that's a really good example. Like, we have no problem as men talking about it with our cars,
yeah, I know.
and guys have no problem where it's like, I love the Tacoma, or I love the way that they finished out the Mustangs, or I love those classic Mustangs, or whatever else. And that's a safe space for us to be able to do that. And you can and should care about your grooming and your clothing and everything else to that same extent, because you're always in your clothes, you're not always in your car.
How long is the beard staying around?
That's a great question. I have no idea, because again, do we see it go into very specific subcultures? I mean, look at how politicized the mask has become. Does the
Yeah,
beard become a symbol of, I refuse to wear a mask, and even if you're going to make me wear one, it's a way for me to subtly say it's not even going to be effective because it's not going to work with my beard. Therefore, I'm rebelling against whatever the culture is that's become that way. I mean, is that where it goes? Where you get people who say, well, no, I think that wearing a mask is a good thing, and you should look after people, and you should take care of things a certain way. And that means I am going to shave my beard, and I'm not going to embrace it. I don't know. There's so many variables that come into this kind of stuff, and I could see it very much going that way, where it becomes part and parcel of the mask culture and the aesthetic, and how you get people again splitting along
yeah.
those lines.
So much psychology in it. So much.
So
Tell people where
much.
they can learn more about you.
Masculine-style.com is the main website, so you can go check out
Okay.
stuff there.
And wives
Really,
and girlfriends' wives can sign up their boyfriends and
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yep. Go check that out. If you want to check out the book, it's called The Appearance of Power, and you can
Yep.
read that. It's available on Amazon, and that's paperback, Kindle, or if you want to hear me read it to you, you can do it through the audiobook version. And then as far as social media is concerned, I'm most active on Twitter and Instagram, and those are at Tanner Guzy.
Awesome. Thanks for doing this. I'll be in touch with you. Maybe you can because that's always been the issues. Like, my wife and I will talk about it, and she's pretty basic, not basic dress, but she's just pretty black and white in the way she thinks. And she's like, yeah, this looks good. Or, people are like, oh, you should wear big shoulders to get rid of your stomach. And her answer is just get rid of the stomach, and then everything else goes away.
Which is a good answer.
It's the right answer too. So I give her credit for that. She's great for that. So thanks so much, Tanner. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brett.
You got it.